The Zilani had never begged before. Picture this. For 3,000 years, these people have been the galaxy's most successful traders. Tall, graceful beings with long necks like swans. They were known for their politeness and their ability to make deals that left everyone happy. They settled disputes with contracts, not weapons. When there was trouble, they'd offer better trade terms or economic partnerships. Violence was something they read about in ancient history books. But now they were broadcasting desperate messages across every star system they could reach. Please, their voices crackled through space on every frequency. We offer complete surrender. Take our worlds, take our resources, take everything we have. Just let our people live. You see, the Vorthak Hive fleet was coming, and when people heard that name, civilizations packed up and ran. These weren't your typical space invaders looking to conquer planets and rule over populations. No, the Vorthak were something much worse. They were consumers. Think of locusts, but the size of battleships. The Vorthak would arrive at a planet and strip it clean. They'd harvest every tree, process every animal, break down every building, and even mine the bedrock. They'd turn everything, and I mean everything, into biofuel for their endless fleet. When they were done, there wouldn't even be dust left behind. Just empty space where a world used to be. The worst part? There was no negotiating with them. No surrender terms, no tribute they'd accept, no mercy they'd show. They had one purpose: consume and move on. It was like trying to negotiate with a forest fire. So when the Zilani realized the Vorthak were heading their way, they did what they'd always done. They asked for help. They sent messages to every major power in the galaxy. The hegemony, with their massive battle fleets. The Trade Federation, with their economic might. Even the Synthetic Collective, those artificial intelligences who supposedly calculated the optimal outcome for everyone. The response was the same from all of them. Sorry, but you're on your own. The hegemony sealed their borders and pretended the Zilani didn't exist. The Trade Federation cut all communications and deleted the Zilani from their contact lists. The Synthetic Collective ran their calculations and decided that helping the Zilani had a 0% chance of success. So they simply went dark. One by one, every civilization that could have helped turned their backs. The Zilani were abandoned, left to face extinction alone. But way out on the edge of the galaxy, in a place most folks wouldn't dare to visit, Captain Jake Miller was listening to those desperate broadcasts. Miller was commanding a survey ship called the Defiance, and they were doing something that would seem impossible to most alien species. They were mapping asteroid fields in what everyone else called the Death Zone. This was space so dangerous, so filled with deadly radiation from black holes and dying stars, that most civilizations considered it completely off-limits. The radiation out there could cook an alien crew in minutes. The gravity fields from collapsing stars would tear apart ships that weren't built tough enough. The cosmic storms would fry electronics that weren't properly shielded. It was a place where only the truly desperate or the truly crazy would go. But humans had been working out there for years, treating it like just another day at the office. Miller was sitting in his captain's chair, listening to Zilani's pleas for help, when his tactical officer spoke up. Lieutenant Amy Walsh had been running numbers on her screen, and what she found wasn't encouraging. "Captain," she said, looking up from her calculations, "how many ships do the Vorthak have in their fleet?" Miller had been wondering the same thing. "What's your count, Walsh?" "About 40,000 ships, sir. All of them purpose-built for war and consumption." She paused, then added the really bad news. "We got 47 ships total in all of human space, and most of those are mining vessels and cargo haulers. Any reasonable military commander would have laughed at those odds. 47 ships against 40,000? It wasn't even a fight, it was suicide." But Miller just nodded slowly, like he was considering the weather forecast. The truth was, humans had something that no other species in the galaxy possessed. They were absolutely, completely insane by everyone else's standards. What other civilizations saw as certain death, humans saw as a challenging work environment. Miller stood up from his chair and walked over to the communication station. "Give me a direct line to Earth Command," he said calmly. Walsh stared at him. Sir, are you thinking what I think you're thinking? Miller smiled. That kind of smile that meant someone was about to do something that would either be remembered as brilliant or completely crazy. Tell Earth Command we've got some new neighbors who need help, and ask them how fast they can get our people together. In the distance, space itself seemed to hold its breath, waiting to see what the humans would do next. Admiral Brooks stood on the bridge of his command ship, looking out at the strangest fleet that had ever assembled in human space. When Earth Command had put out the call for volunteers, they honestly weren't sure anyone would show up. After all, they were asking people to fly into certain death against impossible odds to help aliens they'd never met. Instead, they got more volunteers than they had ships. 47 vessels of every shape and size floated in formation, if you could call it that. There was a hard labor, Captain Lisa Park's mining ship that looked more like a flying construction site than anything military. Next to it, Dr. Kevin Wright's research vessel Discovery bristled with scientific equipment instead of weapons. Captain Tony Rodriguez had brought his cargo hauler Big Rig, a ship designed to move containers between star systems, not fight wars. There were mining platforms that doubled as mobile refineries, passenger liners hastily converted with extra fuel tanks, even a few deep space tugs that normally rescue broken-down freighters. Not a single purpose-built warship in the bunch. But every crew had volunteered, and that meant something. Brooks opened the fleet-wide communication channel. No fancy ceremony, no dramatic music, just straight talk. All right, people, here's the situation, he said, his voice carrying to every ship in the fleet. The Zilani are about to be completely wiped out. The Vordak fleet has about 40,000 ships, all of them built for war. We have 47 ships, most of them built for hauling cargo or digging up asteroids. The odds are roughly 1,000 to 1 against us. Any questions? The first voice that crackled back belonged to Captain Lisa Park from the hard labor. Park was a straight-talking woman who'd spent 15 years mining in the death zone, and she didn't sugarcoat anything. Admiral, I've got to ask the obvious question here. Any particular reason we're doing this? I mean, we don't know these Zilani people from a hole in the ground. They're not human. They're not our allies. And they're not even offering us anything in return. There was a moment of silence across the fleet. It was a fair question, and everyone was thinking it. Why risk everything for strangers? Brooks smiled, though nobody could see it. You know what, Park? That's exactly why we're doing this. Because someone should help them, and apparently we're the only ones crazy enough to try. Every other civilization in the galaxy looked at the odds and decided it wasn't worth the risk. But that's not who we are. He paused, looking out at the assembled ships. Our ancestors didn't cross oceans because it was safe. They didn't explore space because it was easy. They did it because it needed doing. And right now, saving the Zilani needs doing. Captain Rodriguez's voice came through next. Admiral, my grandmother always said that how you treat strangers says everything about who you are. I'm in. One by one, every captain in the fleet confirmed they were ready to go. Not because they had to, but because they wanted to. The journey to Zilani space should have taken 3 weeks using the safe hyperspace routes that other species preferred, the wide, well-mapped paths that stayed far from dangerous stellar phenomena. But humans didn't have 3 weeks, and they certainly didn't take the safe routes. Instead, Brooks plotted a course that would have horrified any alien navigator. They jumped through hyperspace using paths that skimmed dangerously close to neutron stars, where the radiation would have killed most alien crews in minutes. They threaded between gravity wells from black holes that would have torn apart ships with weaker hulls. They cut through cosmic storm systems that would have fried the electronics of any vessel that wasn't built to Earth's paranoid safety standards. What other species considered absolutely impossible, humans treated like a slightly challenging commute. The same radiation that would cook alien crews, humans just wore better suits and reinforced their shielding. The crushing gravity that would tear apart other ships, human vessels were built to handle Earth's gravity, which was already stronger than most planets could produce. They made the journey in 4 days. When the human fleet dropped out of hyperspace in Zilani space, the local population was ready to meet them. The Zilani leadership had hastily assembled at their capital world's main spaceport, though they honestly weren't sure what to expect. Were these beings saviors coming to rescue them? Or were they just another group of aliens who would make promises they couldn't keep? The distinction was getting harder to tell as their extinction approached. The lead Zolani, an elderly diplomat named Keshtar, stepped forward when Admiral Brooks materialized via hologram. Through their translation device, his words came out formal and grateful. Admiral Brooks, we are eternally grateful that you have answered our call for help. We know the odds are impossible, and we don't expect miracles. Perhaps we could arrange for evacuation ships to save some of our people? Or maybe you could help us negotiate surrender terms with the Vorthack that might spare some lives? Brooks looked genuinely confused, like someone had just asked him to explain why water was wet. Negotiate, he repeated slowly. I think there might be some misunderstanding here. We didn't come all this way to help you run away or surrender. We came here to fight. The silence that followed was deafening. The Zolani stared at the human admiral like he'd just announced he planned to punch a star. Fight! Keshtar finally managed. But Admiral, you have 47 ships. They have 40,000. It's mathematically impossible. Brooks grinned, and for the first time, the Zolani began to understand that they might have just met the craziest species in the galaxy. Well, Brooks said, I guess we'll see about that. The Vorthack Hive fleet emerged from hyperspace like a nightmare made real. 40,000 bioships, each one a living creature bred for war and consumption, materialized in the space around the Zolani homeworld. Their hulls pulsed with organic rhythms, and their weapon systems twitched with hungry anticipation. The Hive Queen's consciousness swept across the battlefield, taking in every detail through thousands of compound eyes. This should have been simple. Another terrified civilization, another easy harvest. The Vorthack had done this dance countless times before. Arrive, overwhelm, consume, move on. But something was wrong. The Hive Queen's attention focused on defensive positions around the Zolani planet. There were ships there, all right, but they weren't where ships were supposed to be. Instead of hiding behind the planet's protective magnetic field or clustering around defensive stations, these strange vessels were scattered in positions that made no tactical sense whatsoever. Submine Korth. The Hive Queen's mental voice echoed to the collective consciousness. Analyze the defensive positions. The designated submind, responsible for tactical analysis, sent back readings that caused confusion to ripple through the Hive network. Hive Queen, the unknown vessels are positioned near Pulsar 7. That radiation field should have killed their crews hours ago. Several more ships are stationed close to the unstable red giant star. The gravitational stress should have torn them apart. The Hive Queen processed this information with growing irritation. Perhaps these aliens have better shielding than most. No matter. Even if they survive the radiation, they cannot survive us. But another submind chimed in with even stranger data. Hive Queen, 3 of their vessels are actually inside the asteroid field near the gas giant. They're using mining equipment to... I'm not sure what they're doing. The Hive Queen had consumed over 300 civilizations. She'd seen every defensive strategy, every desperate tactic, every last-ditch effort to avoid extinction. But she'd never seen anyone position their ships in places that should have killed them before the battle even started. It doesn't matter, she declared to her swarm. They are few, we are many. Advance and feed. The first wave of Vorthack bioships swept toward the human positions like a living tide. Each ship was the size of a city block, covered in natural armor that had evolved over millennia, armed with biocannons that could punch through the strongest metals. They expected the humans to do what every other species did, fire their weapons, try to maintain formation, maybe attempt some kind of coordinated defense. Instead, Captain Ryan Cole aboard the mining vessel Rockhound did something that violated every rule of space combat. Cole had spent 12 years mining in the death zone, working in places where one wrong move meant instant death from radiation, gravity, or cosmic storms. To him, Pulsar 7 wasn't a deadly hazard. It was a tool. All right, boys. Cole announced his crew over the internal comm. Remember that trick we used to break up that platinum asteroid last year? The one where we triggered a localized magnetic field collapse. His demolitions expert, a cheerful woman named Beth Murphy, grinned as she armed the mining charges. The one that nearly got us fired for being too dangerous? That's the one, Cole confirmed. Except this time, we're not aiming at an asteroid. The approaching Vorthack bioships were still several thousand kilometers away when Cole fired his entire payload of mining charges directly into Pulsar 7's magnetic field. The explosives, designed to fracture solid rock, instead disrupted the delicate magnetic balance of a stellar object that was already on the edge of instability. The result was spectacular and terrifying. The pulsar erupted in a directed stellar flare that shot across space like the finger of an angry god. The radiation beam, concentrated and amplified by the magnetic field disruption, swept across the first wave of Vorthack ships like a cosmic blowtorch. A dozen bioships simply vanished, their organic hulls vaporizing instantly in radiation levels that would have been lethal to any normal crew. The Vorthack submine screamed in confusion and pain as they lost contact with an entire attack wing. But the humans? They were still there, still operational, still very much alive inside radiation that should have cooked them like microwave dinners. "Nice shooting, Cole." Admiral Brooks' voice crackled over the comm, calm as if he were commenting on the weather. "That's what I call using your environment to your advantage." The secret was simple, though it would have seemed impossible to most alien species. Humans working in the death zone didn't just wear radiation suits. They wore military-grade protection that was designed to keep them alive in the worst conditions the galaxy could produce. What was lethal to other species was just another day at the office for people who regularly worked near black holes. From the command ship, Lieutenant Amy Walsh was watching the tactical display with professional satisfaction. She'd been coordinating mining operations in dangerous space for 8 years, and this was just mining on a larger scale. "Admiral," she reported, "second wave incoming. They're trying to flank around the asteroid field." Brooks nodded. "Walsh, are those gravity mines ready?" Walsh's finger hovered over the detonator controls. The gravity mines were actually standard mining explosives that had been positioned throughout the asteroid field over the past few hours. But they weren't meant to blow up asteroids this time. "Ready to go, sir. This should be interesting." She pressed a button, and the asteroid field exploded into motion. Thousands of rocks, some as large as buildings, suddenly became high-velocity projectiles launched by carefully placed mining charges. The debris cloud expanded outward like a deadly flower, catching the second wave of Vorthack ships in a storm of stone and metal moving at incredible speeds. The Vorthack bioships, evolved for combat against energy weapons and missiles, had no defense against being hammered by an entire asteroid field turned into ammunition. As the second wave of attackers was torn apart by flying rocks, the Hive Queen's consciousness reeled in confusion. These weren't proper military tactics. This was something else entirely. Something insane and brilliant and completely unexpected. For the first time in her existence, the Hive Queen began to wonder if she'd made a serious mistake. The Vorthack had been doing this for thousands of years. They perfected the art of consumption across 300 different star systems. Roll in with overwhelming force, crush any resistance in the first few minutes, then get down to the business of harvesting everything that moved, breathed, or grew. This battle should have followed the same script. They had 40,000 bioships against 47 human vessels. The math was simple, brutal, and final. Any reasonable military computer would have calculated the outcome in seconds. Total Vorthack victory. 0 human survivors. But nobody had bothered to tell the humans about reasonable military tactics. Captain Owen Davis was currently proving this point by doing something that would have gotten him court-martialed in any sane navy. He was piloting his cargo hauler heavy lifter through gravity well of a dying red giant star, using the massive stellar object like a cosmic slingshot. Davis had been hauling freight through dangerous space for 15 years. He'd navigated asteroid fields during solar storms, threaded his way between binary pulsars, and once famously delivered medical supplies by flying to the tail of a comet. To him, using a dying star as cover was insane. It was just creative navigation. "Come on, you beautiful old girl," he muttered his ship as he dove deeper into the gravity well. The heavy lifter groaned and creaked around him, but she held together. Human ships were built tough because space was trying to kill you every second of every day. Behind him, 200 Vortak bioships were giving chase, their organic hulls pulsing with fury. The Hive Queen had ordered them to destroy this single human vessel, and they were determined to obey. But as they followed Davis deeper into the stellar gravity, well, something started going wrong. The Vortak ships had evolved for combat in normal space. Their biohulls were designed to handle energy weapons and high-velocity impacts, not the crushing gravitational forces near a dying star. As they pursued Davis through his impossible maneuvers, the weaker ships began to stretch and deform. Davis pulled his cargo hauler through a turn that used the star's gravity to achieve impossible acceleration. The G-forces pressed him deep into his pilot seat. 8 GS, then 9, then 10. His vision started to gray at the edges, but he kept flying. Humans from Earth were used to heavy gravity. What would have turned an alien crew into liquid paste was just an uncomfortable workout for someone who'd grown up in Earth's crushing gravitational field. The Vortak ships trying to follow him weren't so lucky. Half of them simply came apart as tidal forces tore their organic hulls in different directions. The others managed to maintain structural integrity, but their crews were being crushed by G-forces their biology couldn't handle. "Admiral," Davis called out over the comm, his voice steady despite the crushing acceleration, "I've got about 200 bugs chasing me through the death spiral. Most of them are falling apart, but the survivors are still coming." "How copy?" Admiral Brooks' voice crackled back through the static caused by stellar radiation. "Copy that, Davis. Outstanding work. Miller, are you in position with those solar mines?" Captain Jake Miller was stationed in what most species would consider the absolute worst place to park a spaceship, close enough to the system's main star that his hull temperature readings were making his engineers nervous. But Miller had spent years mining solar materials from stellar coronas, and he knew exactly how close he could get without being vaporized. "Ready and waiting, Admiral," Miller replied, watching his instrument panels carefully. "I've got mining charges positioned all around the star's magnetic field lines, just waiting for our friends to get into position." The plan was insane, but that seemed to be humanity's specialty. Miller had spent the last hour using standard mining equipment to place explosive charges around the star's magnetic field. Not to mine the star, that was impossible even for humans, but to destabilize it just enough to trigger an artificial solar flare. "Solar flare in 3-2, mark." Miller triggered the detonation sequence, and the star responded exactly as his calculations had predicted. The mining charges disrupted the magnetic field lines that contained the stellar plasma, and the result was a directed eruption of energy that shot across space like the universe's largest cannon. The electromagnetic pulse that followed was powerful enough to fry electronics across half the star system. Every Vortak ship caught in the blast radius went dark instantly, their bioelectrical systems overloaded by radiation that their organic components simply couldn't handle. The remaining Vortak forces, what was left of them, began to fall back in disarray. This wasn't how warfare was supposed to work. You didn't use stars as weapons. You didn't navigate through stellar graveyards like they were highway on-ramps. You certainly didn't treat cosmic phenomena like mining equipment. The Hive Queen's consciousness was fracturing with confusion and something that might have been fear. In 300 conquered civilizations, she never encountered anything like this. These humans fought like the void itself, unpredictable, relentless, and utterly without regard for what was supposed to be possible. Retreat. The order echoed to the collective consciousness of the remaining bioships. Full retreat. Mark this system as forbidden territory. As the surviving Vortak ships fled back toward the edge of the system, the Hive Queen sent one final message to the swarm network. The Deathworlders are not to be engaged. They fight with the weapons of gods. The humans, meanwhile, were already beginning salvage operations on the destroyed Vortak vessels, treating the aftermath of an impossible victory like just another day's work in the most dangerous neighborhood in the galaxy. The silence that followed the Vortak retreat was deafening. For the first time in 6 months, the Zolani homeworld wasn't receiving desperate emergency broadcasts, evacuation warnings, or countdown timers to extinction. The great orbital defense platforms that had been abandoned weeks ago were suddenly quiet. Their emergency klaxons finally shut off. Deep in the underground emergency shelters that honeycombed their capital city, millions of Zolani slowly began to emerge. They'd been preparing for death, making peace with their ancestors, recording final messages for anyone who might find their world after the Vorthack were finished with it. Instead, they found something completely unexpected. The humans weren't celebrating. There were no victory parades, no triumphant speeches, no monuments being erected to commemorate their impossible win against 40,000 enemy ships. Instead, the humans were working. Captain Tony Rodriguez had his cargo hauler positioned next to a damaged orbital station and was already running repair cables. Dr. Kevin Wright was conducting detailed scans of the system's asteroid fields, muttering excitedly about mineral compositions. Captain Lisa Park had somehow gotten her mining ship close enough to one of the outer planets to begin preliminary geological surveys. It was like they'd saved an entire civilization and then immediately got back to their day jobs. The lead Zilani diplomat, Keshtar, finally worked up the courage to approach Admiral Brooks. The old Zilani was still shaking from the stress of nearly watching his entire species get wiped out, and he wasn't quite sure how to process what had just happened. Admiral Brooks. He began carefully, his translator working overtime to convert his formal diplomatic language into something humans could understand. We cannot possibly repay you for what you've done. Our entire civilization owes you a debt that we could never hope to repay in 1,000 lifetimes. You have given us our lives, our futures, our children's children's futures. How can we ever? Brooks held up a hand, and Keshtar stopped mid-sentence. The human admiral was looking at him with a kind of expression that suggested he was missing something obvious. Actually, Brooks said in that straightforward way humans had of cutting through diplomatic nonsense, "We were hoping we could work something out. Your people know these trade routes better than anyone in the galaxy, and we've been looking to expand our shipping operations out here on the Rim. Plus, our preliminary scans show your outer systems have some really interesting mineral deposits." Keshtar stared at the human admiral like he'd just started speaking in ancient mathematical equations. You want to do business with us? Well, yeah, Brooks replied with a slight grin. That's kind of why we came out here in the first place. Earth Command figured we could use some friends in this sector, and you folks seem decent enough. Fair traders, good reputation for keeping your word, established shipping networks. From our perspective, this is exactly the kind of partnership that benefits everyone. The Zilani diplomat felt his worldview shifting in ways that made him slightly dizzy. These humans had just fought an impossible battle against overwhelming odds to save complete strangers, and now they wanted to do business? Like this was all some kind of elaborate job interview? Meanwhile, Captain Jake Miller was already composing a message to transmit back to human space. Mission accomplished. The Zilani are good people, their shipping networks are solid, and the Vorthack won't be bothering anyone for a while. Oh, and you need to send more mining equipment out here. This whole sector is absolutely rich in rare earth elements. We're looking at profit margins that'll make the Mars colonies jealous. As the human fleet began establishing what looked like permanent operations in Zilani space, Admiral Brooks decided it was time to send a message to the rest of the galaxy. He opened a broadcast on all major diplomatic frequencies, the kind of transmission that would reach every major civilization within 50 light years. This is Admiral Brooks of the Human Defense Fleet. His voice carried across space with calm authority. The Zilani Confederation is now under our protection. We got 47 ships out here and some really creative ideas about stellar engineering. Just wanted everyone to know in case there were any questions about the neighborhood's new management. The response was immediate and galaxy-wide. Civilizations that had ignored the Zilani's desperate pleas for help suddenly discovered urgent reasons to establish diplomatic contact with humanity. The hegemony, who had sealed their borders when the Vorthack arrived, now sent polite inquiries about opening trade negotiations. The Trade Federation, who had deleted the Zilani from their contact databases, suddenly found the Zilani's information and wanted to discuss mutual shipping agreements. Even the Synthetic Collective, those coldly logical artificial intelligences who had calculated that helping the Zilani was impossible, began running new probability matrices that included humans as a variable. Their conclusion was simple. If the Deathworlders were making friends, it might be wise to avoid making enemies. Far across the galaxy, The surviving remnants of the Vorthak Hive fleet limped back to their breeding worlds, carrying with them a new kind of knowledge. The Hive Queen, her consciousness still fragmented from the trauma of encountering an impossible enemy, added a new entry to their collective racial memory. Avoid the yellow star systems. The Deathworlders live there now, and they fight like the void itself. They use stars as weapons and treat cosmic disasters like mining equipment, mark all human territories as absolutely forbidden. These beings are not prey. They are predators that hunt in the spaces between dying suns. And in the quiet corners of the galaxy, other civilizations began to whisper new truth. If you needed help, if you were facing extinction, if the impossible was your only hope, there was a species crazy enough to answer the call. They lived in the death zones. They fought with stellar phenomena, and they always wanted to talk business afterward. The humans had arrived on the galactic stage, and nothing would ever be the same.